Welcome back to part 2 of Lee's episode, our special episode for Remembrance Sunday. We hope you enjoyed part 1. We really think this is a fantastic episode, and part 2 is not going to disappoint. We left you on a bit of a cliffhanger where Lee was just about to talk about his journey and some of the work that he's done, and that's where we're going to kick off. And within that, he's going to talk to us about how he first identified struggling with anxiety.
Now, I'm a very self-assured individual, very confident, never had any issues like in terms of feeling vulnerable or anxious. So I'm pacing around the house at like 3 or 4 in the morning, and my wife eventually comes downstairs. She's like, "What the hell are you doing?" And I explain my feelings, right? So I don't know that I'm having this anxiety. So I have to articulate the way I'm feeling to her. And she's like, that's anxiety. You've got anxiety. And then there was a bit of a joke in the middle of all this because she was like, "Don't tell me you've got to 33 years old and never experienced anxiety." And it's like, I haven't, it's never happened. So,
and having identified that he needed some help and some support, how he approached the next steps to that, which can often be a real challenge for people.
So I would say there's plenty of helplines out there, right? And I think you just pick up the phone and ring someone, because I think, and this is what I did when I rang that helpline, my perception of it was, this is only for people who are, moments away from, doing something tragic like suicide, for example. That was my perception, that I don't want to wait. And men do this a lot. I don't want to waste someone's time. Don't fuss over me like it's just little old me. And so I would say, no, these helplines are there for everyone. And the point is to get it as early as possible. So as trivial as you may think it may be, that's good, because it's actually going to be less work for you and for any specialists that are going to need to support you with your journey anyway, right? So I would always say, pick up that phone, because I felt so ashamed. I was so lost actually as well, because I didn't know who to ring. I rang combat stress.
Throughout the episode, Lee emphasizes that actually our approach towards mental health should be similar to our approach towards physical health, in that it should be proactive and not reactive, and that therapy is not just for those people that are at rock bottom, that actually we should get involved in that as soon as we start to recognize some of the signs and symptoms that we might need a bit of help. And as always, towards the end of the show, Lee reflects upon some of his experiences as a younger man.
I was very carefree at 18, and I did feel bulletproof like a lot of people, but I am certain that I pissed a lot of people off as well. And that's not on in society. We got to look after each other.
Whilst also unknowingly destroying one of the key formats of the show.
Lee, you might have ended our ability to ask guests to give their own selves any advice, because that's so good.
Part 2 really is another fantastic episode, so sit back, relax, and enjoy. You've said a couple of things as you've been talking, and it all comes down to, you use the phrase emotional maturity, and I know, because we've had a chat beforehand, but I just wanted to ask you about your kind of journey to gaining that, because you were quite open about having done some work in that area, in terms of your mental health. And can you share some of that with us?
Yeah, of course I can. Yeah, so I think it segues neatly on the back of what I was describing earlier, right? So I transitioned out the military, I got this job, I'd moved, relocated towns, a lot of big life events were going on at the time. I was moving house. My wife was pregnant. I had this new job and a few other bits and pieces, and I was slowly but surely, without realizing it, sort of burning out, right, and crashing and burning. And effectively, that led to the stress. Eventually, led to anxiety. So, and anxiety led on to depression eventually, right? But I think when I talk about the emotional maturity, for me personally, to help me identify this, I went through a CBT, so cognitive behavioural therapy, right? But before that step, I had to acknowledge that the wheels had blown off. And actually, I really should have recognized that months before, right? And I think the start point is within oneself, and self-diagnosing that something isn't quite right. And it's having that mental awareness. Now, what really brought it home to me, where something didn't feel quite right, was I started to feel anxiety. This is going to sound ridiculous. So I think I was 33 at the time, and I effectively was having what we commonly known as an anxiety attack. Now, I'm a very self-assured individual, very confident, never had any issues, like in terms of feeling vulnerable or anxious. So I'm pacing around the house at like 3 or 4 in the morning, and my wife eventually comes downstairs. She's like, "What the hell are you doing?" And I explain my feelings, right? So I don't know that I'm having this anxiety. So I have to articulate the way I'm feeling to her. And she's like, that's anxiety. You've got anxiety. And then there's a bit of a joke in the middle of all this, because she was like, don't tell me you've got to 33 years old and never experienced anxiety. And it's like, I haven't, it's just never happened. So anyway, so then I realized like something's not right. And there's other telltale signs as well, like, the stress affecting sleep. I was becoming very dependent on alcohol. I think this is another catch-22 situation when you're working in environments like the military or sports teams. Alcohol is never too far away and can be lent on as a bit of a crutch to suppress feelings. And I was certainly doing that. So when I sort of dwelled on the fact that I think I had Googled anxiety and then realized I had something that I didn't understand. Like, how would I not understand the feeling about myself? I reached out to a helpline, and then they were just wonderful in terms of just saying, we're someone saying we're here, it's fine. You will get help. And then I went down, CBT. So I got put in touch with a cognitive behavioural therapist. I had to go through a couple because, like, I think it's like you got to find the right fit in terms of, especially with CBT, it's a person that's talking to you. So, it's, you got to find the right person. So I'd encourage anyone, if anyone was going to do that, almost shop around, find the right person who sort of is the right fit for you. And I came across a great guy called Rob. I still use to this day, even though I'd caveat this, even though I would say my mental health is fine. I don't have any, and, I just swear by CBT now. And then I went on this journey with Rob, and I began to learn about myself, why I feel these things, what these feelings do, what my body needs in these certain situations, the chemical imbalances, and how alcohol actually can affect your chemical imbalance and make you feel, if you've ever had beer fear the next day, and it was just this enlightenment, this journey that I went on with this individual who just taught me everything that I now recognize within myself. And then that has armed me with, amongst other things, there's tools in my arsenal in terms of mindfulness and well-being, and I do journaling and some grounding exercise, because if I can see the triggers, so I'm better at identifying the triggers now, and I'm much better armed to then deal with the triggers because of CBT.
Yeah. And you said something to me when we spoke the other day along those lines, because I think it's really important to flag what you said there about actually your mental health is good, but you're still seeking that support. And you gave me like an analogy in terms of comparing it to physical health, didn't you?
Yeah, it's exactly that. So I see mental health exactly the same way as I see physical health, in terms of, like, we should just be doing a little bit more exercise anyway, right? We need to take care of ourselves physically. Everyone would agree with that, whether it's walking more, doing some running, whatever it may be, right? And I see the same thing with mental health, because if you are, for example, if you begin to, we spoke about environments before and what environment you operate in, then normally a lot of issues come from professional sort of circumstances, right? So in my case, certainly. So would I not train for a marathon and just run a marathon and expect to run that race? No, I would train for that. So now I recognize that I'm in a demanding professional environment that takes a lot of energy from me. I need to be training continuously to deal with those things. So the little anecdote I gave earlier about not getting validation about sending an email to someone that I've been working 3 days on, I'm okay with that now. I'm okay with that now because I've gone, so I very much see the two, and they're not mutually exclusive. They're interwoven. If you do more exercise, your mental health massively benefits from that. So, and vice versa, if you're in a better mental health state, you're more motivated to go and exercise, right? So I see it like physical health as well.
Yeah. I think it's such a refreshing perspective to hear, because I think so often, and Nibbo, we've talked, haven't we, on the show in lots of different scenarios, that actually kind of often within the UK, therapy is kind of viewed as the last resort, isn't it? If you're about to keel over, better get some therapy, as opposed to actually what you just said. Actually, I work a really demanding job. this is part of how I look after myself. It's just part of that training program. It's really nice to hear, I think, and it will resonate with lots.
Yeah, exactly. And I think people are very willing to subscribe to a gym membership, for example. I see this guy on a monthly basis, actually. So I value him, for me personally, on that regular basis. And it's less than a gym membership. And once a month we check in and we go through some stuff, so it's just the same as a gym membership, really. But CBT isn't for everyone. I appreciate that. But yeah, that's how I view it anyway.
Yeah, I've never thought about it that way. Yeah, go on. You've been quiet for ages. We'll let you. All right, but keep it short.
I reckon we're going to say the same thing, Brad, that actually I think a lot of people think that therapy has to be a particular thing, whereas every therapist I've ever known or spoken to has been really, I don't want to use the word patient, client might be a better word, has been really client focused and been like, well, let's work out what works for you. And not just what is affordable, but I think men are kind of naturally programmed to think, I don't want to spend this money on myself. I think we're naturally programmed to try to spend it elsewhere. Also, I don't want to spend this money on something that I don't physically get to show someone what I bought with this money. But therapy can be anything. Therapy can be monthly CBT. I'm sure if you said to your CBT practitioner, therapist, actually, can we go bi-monthly? So like once every 2 months, I'm sure they'd be fine with it. Like if it was in your interest.
And I'd do that, Nibo, as well. Yeah. So actually, it's a good point. So I'll go through periods of maybe not speaking to him for 3 months if I'm in a good place and a little bit busy and may have a holiday, other bits and pieces. And there have been times in recent years, I'd say as recently as 12 months ago, where I was seeing him twice a month just to keep on top of a few things. And so like you say, you can dial it up and dial it down. And I think we should not look at, like I think you said it, Brad, like about being like a last resort. Like therapy isn't, you've had, it's almost like the analogy would be you've got the injury, now you're on the physio table, recovering, right?
Yeah.
But actually, what if we was on that physio table getting a sports massage before the event to not get injured in the first place?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's taking a more proactive approach rather than, I think with mental health support, we see it as more of a reactive mechanism, whereas if we change the dial into more of a proactive mechanism, so maybe not just the training, but you look at it like the stretching and the yoga and the limbering up to stop the muscles from pinging in the first place. That's the way I see it. Anyway.
I can remember that coming through in the physical world of, did they call it prehab, where actually that for rugby players in certain positions that got really common injuries, where they would just train that area more. It was always, there was a period, I feel like it was like the early 2000s, where everyone was injuring their rotator cuff in their shoulders. And so then rotator cuff preventative training came in so that people didn't have to rehab a rotator cuff. They could just prevent it from happening in the first place. And yeah, I'd love to get to that place where people adopt that mindset with their mental health of actually thinking that they prepare.
Especially now, like what you're describing there, Nebo, is like something in that environment changed and therefore more injuries became apparent and therefore they had to do something about it. I think you look at society and life now, things like social media, for example, isn't doing anyone's mental health any good, right? And we are just in this constant dialed in world. Like I changed my watch because my watch is telling me everything all the time. I was like, I don't need to know this information every 30 seconds. Leave me alone, right? So we're all tapped in and dialed in constantly, and it is just overwhelming us. And I think this is why I would say if this is the world that we live in, i.e. the environment has changed, that prehab, proactive approach would be really useful for some people. Not all, a lot of people are in a really good place, have really good support networks around them, and hopefully and thankfully may never need to do that, right? But I think just changing the perception of therapy and mental health support networks to a more proactive approach would benefit a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. I've got one more question, Lee, and then I think we need to move on to the would you rather. So when we talked about that emotional maturity, you said that it starts with you, and it sounds like you had a really positive approach to that, in that you had that panic attack and then you immediately were like, right, I need to do something about that. So I guess my question is, because that's I'd say that's fairly atypical for lots of men. I reckon lots of men start to recognise, first of all, they don't recognise, like you described, the wheels are starting to come off, but we kind of bury our head in the sands with that. And then eventually when they do come off, they're still probably not that kind of, right, I need to do something about that. Have you got any advice or anything that springs to mind in terms of encouraging people to kind of recognise it and then take a step? Like what would you say would be a good first step for somebody who's thinking, God, actually, this is starting to get on top of me now?
Yeah, a step that I took before this. So I would say there's plenty of helplines out there, right? And I think you just pick up the phone and ring someone, because I think, and this is what I did when I rang that helpline, my perception of it was, this is only for people who are, you know, moments away from, you know, doing something tragic like suicide, for example. You know, that was my perception, that I don't want to wait. And men do this a lot. I don't want to waste someone's time. Don't fuss over me like it's just little old me. And so I would say, no, these helplines are there for everyone. And the point is to get it as early as possible. So as trivial as you may think it may be, that's good, because it's actually going to be less work for you and for any specialists that are going to need to support you with your journey anyway, right? You know, so I would always say pick up that phone, because I felt so ashamed. I was so lost actually as well, because I didn't know who to ring. I rang Combat Stress. So Combat Stress is a veterans helpline and I was just apologizing all the way through this, because I was like, this is for guys and girls with PTSD, right? And they've got, you know, traumatic sort of exposure to things in war and all the rest of it. And the lady just was like, you know, it's almost like a mother figure, really. Just said, it's fine, we are here exactly for you. And I just fell apart, you know, at that point. I was just like, it's the first time we just felt this release valve. You know, you don't need to keep fighting it, you don't need to keep trying to push the water uphill, you don't need to keep bottling it in, you know. And so yeah, my advice would be Google a number, pick up a helpline, you know, and just contact someone. And just on that as well, another thing that I realized through this process is, if you don't like speaking to people, you can text, you can email them. You know, there's many other mediums by which to access this support, and I think most men are probably slightly embarrassed to admit they've got a problem, and certainly to bother someone with their time to help. And I think that I'm massively generalizing there and speaking from my own experience, but I do think that is probably the biggest blocker to men seeking help earlier in the cycle.
I'm just going to say, before Brad comes back on that, you don't even need to Google a number. We're going to put certainly Combat Stress. If you've got any other recommendations that you want to tell us offline, Lee, we'll put links to those in the show notes. Mm-hmm. So when you access the episode, if you just go to the show notes, or I might say about this episode, in there will be links to those services. So it's all there ready for people. Sorry, Brad.
I'm going to throw in a few of these would you rathers, but I think we'll go we'll go fairly quick fire on these, because you've already given so much like absolute gold for people listening. I think this is a fantastic episode. So here's a couple of would you rathers. Would you rather have never joined the military or never left?
Great question. I would rather never left. I owe everything to the military, from today. So yeah, I would say if I had a choice, I would absolutely have the military as part of my DNA. Yeah, cool. This is as simple as that. Yeah. And if I had to be a crusty old Sergeant Major many years down the line, then so be it.
Yeah, no, that's a really solid message, and a real testament to the work that people get out of going to the military. And I think, like you said in when you described your journey of kind of not really knowing, and then to come full circle to be like, actually, I owe everything to the military is really amazing, isn't it? In the sort of information sheet that we sent you talked about, and I thought this was really interesting, how young men in particular often feel like bulletproof. And I think we can all relate to that, actually. When you're younger, actually, you don't feel like there's anything to worry about, and actually you just feel like, I'll take everything in my stride. And so would you rather revert to being young and bulletproof for your whole life, or suffer with anxiety and know what you know now in overcoming that?
Wow. Yeah, because it almost staying young is the ignorance is bliss springs to mind. Like that is maybe a simple life, but quite a carefree life at the same time. Um, however, however, I find it hugely rewarding that I can go on a journey and learn things, and I pass my advice on to so many, even peers and friends and family and things like that. So I would say, yeah, as horrible as anxiety and depression and as crippling as it can be, I would have rather have gone through the experiences that I've gone through and come out the other side of it. Because someone said once, it was like, there's a misconception about life being easy, and life isn't easy, really, is it? And I think once we then accept that there are going to be challenges and storms ahead, then these types of things are quite a stoic way of looking at it. But it's I think it just makes it normalizes things. Life isn't always bed of roses. It's just not, is it? So I would go through those experiences and come through the other side.
I am really reluctantly going to have to tip my hat to Brad for a good question there. When he said to me, "Oh, this is going to be this question," I was like, "It's fucking obvious, isn't it? Like, you'd rather be young and bulletproof than have anxiety." And then Brad explained to me, he's like, "No, but think of all the value of all the stuff that he's learned on that journey." And I was like, "Oh, I do see it possibly in a different way." And yeah, Brad, I concede that's a very good question that maybe I didn't appreciate fully first time round. Because I think it's easy for people to think you just take that young, ignorant, cocksure approach to life, when actually, for those of us that are not so young anymore, there is a massive value on the stuff that we've learned because of whatever we've been through to get to where we are. None of us have had a smooth ride to this point, but actually there's huge value on that stuff. And I think that could be really reassuring to anyone listening who is currently in the middle of that. That's the shit. Whatever they're in the middle of, actually, the learning you gain through going through that is so powerful and so valuable that by the time you get to the end of it, you wouldn't change it. You would still go through that to get the learning that you've got.
I agree. One of the most powerful from my perspective from dealing with things is is acceptance. Like I used to be really, I wouldn't say I'm not a control freak, but I like to be the master of my own destiny. There are things in life that you just can't control. And I think once you've sort of learned to accept the situation for what it is, it makes it still challenging to get through the storm, but at least you can start to piece together a bit of a plan, and you can find direction and all the rest of it. So I think I have learned acceptance through this journey, accepting something for what it is, and then pragmatically going and doing something about it has been really useful for me.
Yeah,
Strong
cool.
answer.
I think the other thing that my mind jumped to really when you were talking is the difference in, you mentioned your little girl, and the difference in kind of things that you probably do without thinking in terms of raising your little girl now with the benefit of all of that work that you've done, that would have probably been missing if the 30-year-old bulletproof version was doing that. So it's helpful not just to you, but we pass that information down to the younger generations, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of young men do it. I did it for a period of time. It's a lone wolf mentality, isn't it? It's like, well, if I just put this shield around my heart and my emotions, no one can get in, and I can just crack on through life, and I'm not going to get impacted by something. And the hardest thing I learned, and maybe this is one thing I learned through CBT, is the 3 states you have in life, which is child, adult, and parent. And you do change, through each one of those phases. And being a parent, you cannot shield that heart. You have to let, and for a lot of men, women, I think, are much more emotionally mature at a younger age than men, because we are used to sort of, just doing our thing. That was a big part of my transition. I've got to let someone in, but I'm quite vulnerable now to thoughts and feelings and trying to deal with that. So yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap that up from the would you rather point of view, and we'll hand over to Nibbo now for thinking about meeting your previous selves.
So, Lee, we are going to bring into the room the 8-year-old Lee Howard, and you have a minute to give him whatever advice. In fact, let me explain the situation really fully. The 8-year-old you is going to come into the room. You get a minute to give him advice. Then the 18-year-old you is going to come into the room. So I don't know. Some people change their advice between 8-year-old and 18-year-old versions of themselves. Some people stick with more or less the same advice. And then the 80-year-old you is going to come into the room, and you get a minute to ask him anything you want to ask him. So 8-year-old you comes in the room. What are you going to tell him?
8-year-old me. I think being a parent now, I'm always very conscious of not overwhelming children. I think their innocence is such a superpower, you know, to naively, it gets back to what we were saying earlier, naively to skip through the world and be carefree. So I would, is it a cop-out? I wouldn't really provide too much advice. I would probably warn them as a Manchester United fan that in the not too distant future, they are going to go through some pain, and they should be prepared, and the glory days won't be there forever. So, I think that would be it. I just keep it really sort of carefree, and I just let 8-year-old me be 8-year-old me.
With the glory days not being there forever, would you emphasise then? So enjoy them while they're here.
Enjoy the moment, live in the moment, in the moment, and I think that's the point I'm trying to. It's probably subtly the point I'm trying to convey in terms of not really giving that kid any advice, because that kid is living in the moment, because kids do, don't they?
Yes.
So I'll be like, just do what you're doing and live in the moment, you know. Yeah. So that would be my take on that.
Lee, you might have ended our ability to ask guests to give their 8-year-old selves any advice, because that's so good. I feel bad about, not that 8-year-old you actually exists, obviously, but now I feel bad about that idea of why would you advise an 8-year-old? Why would you not just say, go at it, son? Although we did have a guest once whose episode is coming out soon who said he would tell the kid to tell his teachers to fuck off. Which, if you're going to give an 8-year-old advice, maybe that is, maybe that isn't the advice you give them. But I really love that. Yeah, why would you try to over-inform an 8-year-old and take them out of the moment when they're living in it? Okay, right. He's scuttled off. 18-year-old you has come into the room. You get a minute. What would you tell him?
Yeah, okay, so I would hugely emphasize how the individual's actions not only impact yourself and your future self, but those around you. So I think from my own personal experience, I was doing things at that time that were not setting me up for success in the future. And I think so. I'd like to give them some direction and give them some advice. Where do you want to be? Where are you going? How are these decisions enabling you to get to that destination as fast as possible? And then I would then get them to pull their head out their arse and look around and demonstrate the ripple effect that one individual can have on many people, whether that's close or far, secondary or tertiary effect of someone's behaviours or someone's attitude. So I was very carefree at 18, and I did feel bulletproof like a lot of people, but I am certain that I pissed a lot of people off as well, and that's not on in society. We got to look after each other.
I love that. I had a lads weekend this weekend just gone, and we were reflecting. Actually, we all knew each other from school, and there was a moment of reflection of like, were we dicks at school? By no means were we the bad kid, but like, is there a chance that we were twats at school and that we were less kind to people than either we could have been or that we should have been? And one of the guys was saying, like, if anybody came up to him now from school and said, you know what, you actually, I really struggled with how you treated me at school, he would want to shake their hand and he would want to make amends for it. But I think that's really key, that a lot of young people don't necessarily appreciate the impact they can have on the world around them. Interesting that Brad was talking about younger men feeling bulletproof, but that's a very internalized view.
Yeah.
And maybe not appreciating other people's vulnerability and frailties.
100%. Yeah, I think developing empathy is probably a key one for me that I certainly didn't have at 18.
Yeah, I love that. There's a lot of learning to be done there. Okay, he's gone, and 80-year-old you has come into the room, either in full number ones or he's in what?
he's still got the Bergen on. He's knackered. He's 80 years. He's had it.
Why did you choose this?
He's only 4'2".
Yeah. He's got a raft of issues with his spine and his back.
And other than him bollocking you for choosing that, you've got a minute to ask him anything you want to ask him. What would you go for?
I would ask him when would enough be enough, right? So I think my problem right now is that I where do you stop in terms of, I'm not going to say success, but when we look at a professional career, for example, how far do you go in terms of pushing and climbing that corporate ladder? How much money is enough in the bank account? How, what I mean? Like I feel like we're on this sort of carousel, going round and round and round. And, I would just ask him, at what point would you go, just stop there, and instead of trying to, keep front crawling forward, just live in the moment now. You know what I mean? Like, there's got to be that sort of point in one's life where you go, I've got everything that I need. Some good advice I had once was, you earn a certain amount of money, and effectively that money you'll have a roof over your head. You may rent it, you may own it, doesn't matter. You have a car, won't be the best car, and you'll probably have enough money to go on holiday, whatever that holiday looks like. You start to earn more money, you still have the same things, you just have a nicer car or a bigger house or whatever. So material, is that making you happier? You know what I mean? So so for me, it was a really profound sort of thing for me. Like, I'm on this journey with family and, whatever else, but it's like, where do you just go, that's enough now? Let's just live in the moment and enjoy it. So I would ask him for his steer on, when you get to that age and get to that place, just relax, just enjoy it then.
That's so interesting that I feel like you're telling 8-year-old you to live in the moment, and you're asking 80-year-old you, when can I live in the moment?
Live in the moment.
Yeah.
That's
what I'm pulling from that.
And it takes me back to the point about kind of not having the therapy, even though everything's okay. Like, it's actually because I think a lot of people, and so this is the great thing I think about the podcast, is there'll be a different point in this show for so many different people that resonates. And that really resonates for me, because actually in the current situation that I'm in, where actually, through kind of separation and changing work circumstances and all of that, I've got much less of those material things that you talk about. I have a lesser car, I have a lesser house. Yeah. But actually, I'm in a great place. And so, I know I'm not 80-year-old you, but I'm like, I kind of like, but think about if you can do it before the fall. Like, recognize it. I think it's such a good question, and it's probably one that only you can really answer. But I think it's great to have that foresight to even think to ask that question. Really, we've never had that come up before, have we, Nibbo?
No. I think that's really interesting, and it's definitely something I've thought about as well, Brad. Your situation and mine is not that different, and as I said, I was away on the weekend with my old school friends, and it's really easy when you come from the same origin point to look at your peers and think, well, this guy's on like over 100k a year and living and working in London, and God knows what his house must cost. But then and another guy will have just inherited a significant amount of money. I would never dream of asking him how much, but certainly be far more financially comfortable than me.
Yeah.
But what are we going to do with that money? We're going to have a house, we're going to have a car, we're going to have holidays. And are you going to do anything different with all that money? And at what point can you get off the grindstone a little bit?
And that gets back to what I was saying earlier about, stress being self-induced, right? We get bigger cars and bigger mortgages, and then you're like, oh, what's the next thing? And what's the next thing? So, one thing I've learned is, because and this maybe to stop myself from doing 130% now, we always move the bar of success. So we'll set ourselves a little, what does success look like? And you could be doing some training for a marathon. You could be looking for a position in your career, or whatever success looks like to you. And as soon as we hit it, and this is guys, as soon as we hit it, we fucking move that bar again.
Yeah.
And you don't enjoy it. You don't get to sort of go, I've done, we just move it again and again. And it can be seen as progressive, if you're looking at stereotyping careers and climbing the corporate ladder or other bits and pieces. You could run a marathon in 5 hours and you go, well, actually, I want to do 4 hours. And it's like, you just ran a marathon, I just that's it. You've done it, So yeah, I think not continuously moving the bar of success and allowing ourselves to give ourselves a pat on the back and say, you've done something good there, right?
That is such a key balancing act, isn't it?
Of
at what point do you push yourself on, and at what point do you give yourself a pat on the back? I'm going to do a lot of thinking about that. Sorry, Brad.
Yeah. I was just going to say, it just takes us back to living in the moment, isn't it? And actually, for the most part, most 8-year-olds pretty happy, aren't they? Because they just live in the moment. And the amount of time I speak to clients about, actually, we need to be more in the moment and stop worrying about the if, buts, and maybe, and actually just enjoy where we are right now. So yeah, I think it's almost brought us full circle there. Really, really nice.
That's the end of the 18 and 8-year-old versions of you. And what we'll do now is we'll go into the takeaways. Brad will no doubt give his takeaways first of just any learning that we've achieved from tonight's conversation, any things that we think are going to be quite key to remember. And then I'll give you anything that I think is noteworthy from tonight. And if you've got anything you want to add to that, then by all means stir in. And I know it's all come from you, but if there's anything that either you've changed your view on, or that's really kind of its importance has been highlighted for you, then share yours with us. But Brad, do you want to start off on takeaways?
Yeah, and I'm gonna. This isn't my takeaway because he always ribs me about having loads of takeaways. But we've just been talking about living in the moment. All right, so I'm calling that one in, but it's not one of my takeaways. I'm just highlighting it again. Live in the moment.
Hang on, I'm going to interrupt because you gave me crap about interrupting. Lee, he'd always be like, "This thing that I'm about to tell you isn't a takeaway," and then there'll be a thing that is an addendum to the thing that's not a takeaway.
Yeah.
And he'll get about 17 in there, and then say, "That's my one takeaway."
Right. Well, I'm going to be quick because I'm panicking about how much battery I've got left on my tablet at the minute. So, things that I'm going to come to. I think the thing where you talked earlier on about make decisions that suit you, I think is so important. I think, people need to stop thinking about what suits other people, what's the stereotypical thing they're supposed to do, and actually reflect upon what suits them. Where do they want life to go? What do they need to do to get there? But at the end of the day, when we get to the end of it, I'm sure everyone would much rather, be judged on the decisions they made than the decisions that someone else had made for them. So I think that is a really big one. I love that you talked about pressure being self-induced, and I think you articulated that really well. So I'm not going to say anything more about that. And the final one is just about actually your mental health doesn't need to be at rock bottom to access therapy. Like, it can just be proactive. It can be part of everyday life to keep you in a great space. They're mine. But I think, and I just we'll say thank yous in a minute anyway, but I think you've been incredible on this tonight, Lee. I think there's so much good advice and things that people will pounce on. So, Nibbo, over to you.
Yeah, totally agree with all of those. But interestingly, Bradley, we don't cross over tonight.
Okay.
My takeaways are different to yours and separate to yours, and they're more like observations. I think I'm going to go in reverse order. So my first one is just the importance of sleep. I hammer it home all the time on the courses.
Yeah.
But it's a really interesting thing in that sleep and mental health have got a bi-directional relationship. Good sleep equals good mental health. Bad sleep equals bad mental health. But also, good mental health equals good sleep, and bad mental health equals bad sleep. So because you were talking about how that anxiety attack came out of the blue a little bit for you, if anybody is struggling with their sleep, just be aware that is this trying to tell me? We had Brad, do you remember when we were talking to Skinner, and he was saying that he wished that you could have a non-serious symptom of developing mental ill health? Didn't he say he wished it was like a little fart or something? That if there was this little fart that came along, that, okay, right, I know I need to do something about my mental health. Whereas I think in reality, we do get those small warning signs, but because they're small, we ignore them until they're massive and we can't ignore them. And so actually, if somebody's probably the more key thing is if somebody's sleep is deteriorating, some people might get on fine on a small amount of sleep and that's their normal. But I think a key piece of learning is if your sleep quality and amount is deteriorating, maybe think about addressing your mental health in order to assist your sleep.
Yeah,
so that was my first one. Oh, sorry, Lee, go on.
I was going to say one thing on that about a real current sort of example of that. So I'm obviously now, I've got much better at identifying those triggers as you describe it, and my sleep had been terrible. I've been busy at work. I've had lots on at home. That's life, isn't it? Right? So anyway, been going on for a while. And I could feel, I was like, I'm getting stressed now. I'm starting to burn out. There's a lot of things going on. I need some time off, right? So I'd identified the triggers, and then last week I had Wednesday, Thursday, Friday off, right, from work. And then that was my time. The Wednesday, I spent all day on the sofa. And then that night, I went and slept 12 hours, right? Oof. So I'd had lots of broken sleep leading up to that. Because I was busy, I was getting stressed, and that's life. Things. Life isn't perfect, is it? But the point was, then I identified that, had the sleep. Thursday morning, mate, I thought I could do any task that was thrown at me that day. Because you're absolutely right. There's such a correlation between the two. So that was just last week.
Yeah, no, there is a definite correlation between the two, and I think people forget about it. But or people hear about it and think, it's not that serious.
Yeah.
But when they do that, you're just waiting for a bigger and bigger and bigger sign to say stop and address your mental health now. So that was my first takeaway. My second takeaway is I think men, and we never want to talk men down, but we are men, and I think we can recognise some traits that are common amongst lots of us, might not trust the opinions and views of the outside world too much. But what I think was key was that it was your wife that actually said to you, this is anxiety. So many men think, I'll deal with this, I'll sort this out. And especially somebody like a close family member that maybe they feel they need to provide for, they might not want to let that person in to such an extent where they are being vulnerable. Whereas actually, you did exactly the right thing. Your wife did exactly the right thing in going, this is anxiety. You need to address it. So I thought that was a key takeaway. And then last of all, I think it's really key that you said about men being bad at making new friends. And I just think that's something important for people to remember, that actually society tends to view men as being strong and independent. And whilst we are those things, there's a downside of that, of actually it can be hard to make new friends, and your social circles are key to your mental health. A strong social circle and strong social connections, and we have those with our families, but we need somewhere that isn't work, that isn't the home. We need like a third place.
Third place.
So exactly
true.
That.
So true.
You need that third place where you can go and still have those strong social connections. What I think is interesting with men is that we're usually quite task focused, and it tied in exactly with what you were saying about the military, that if a group of men get together, we tend to want to get together to do something, whereas women tend to want to get together to just be together. like just the enjoyment of each other's company. Whereas men are far more, like I talked about the weekend that I'd been away with some mates just gone. We got together to go walking in the Brecon Beacons. That was the reason for getting together. Obviously, we were in each other's company the whole time, but we'd got together to complete a task. And I think that's just people remembering that men aren't always brilliant at making new friends, but the importance of social circles is really key. And yeah, if anybody wants to look into what it means to have a third place, that's a really key area of learning as well. So yeah, that's my takeaways, and I wondered what yours would be.
Well, you just mentioned at the end, third place. Like I am an avid believer in the third place, and when I relocated to where I live now, I had work and home, place one, place two, no third place, right? And I played football in the past, not played for a long time, managed to get myself involved in a running club, and I managed to get myself involved in a veterans football team, the worst group of men you've ever seen playing football. But the football is the 5% of it. The other 95% is in the bar afterwards, right? And the point is though, that is my third place where I can go and just relax and talk about, just be with other like-minded men and talk about things that have been on my mind, right? And it could be something trivial, but so my takeaway would be absolutely that. And then the final one would be around the one thing I'll say about the signposting that my wife gave me in terms of identifying anxiety. There was precursors leading up to that. We were arguing more. It was more kinetic. There was more disruption in the household, right? Because I'm stressed and I'm projecting onto her. And one thing I would say is that when you're going through these periods, you may, one of the triggers or one of the things you can notice is you may be having more arguments with your people that are closest to you, right? And one thing that I learned through that process is our partners or our closest, confidants are not professional mental health experts, right? And we almost sometimes project ourselves onto them, wanting something back for which they are not qualified or capable of giving. And getting back to, I think, Brad, you said it before about the analogy of the monkey judging the fish and how well it can climb the tree. We do that to our partner sometimes in terms of, but unconsciously doing it. So one thing that I learned pretty quick was she is my partner for many things, but not for therapy and not for projecting my stresses or my anxieties or whatever it may be. That is not her role, So she was a real good sort of person to communicate with and soundboard off. But then the realization where I had to seek more purposeful and deliberate help. So I think just understanding how you are interacting with those people around you is normally quite an early sign as well in terms of where you are in your mental health struggles or your mental health journey.
I love that so much, Lee, because we've covered in little bits, and I'm in my head I'm writing an episode that we'll have to do at some point about relationships, not about dating and relationships, but about long-term relationships, and about how I think there is or has been in some people and in some relationships that expectation that your partner is your partner for everything. And it's such a massive realization to be like, oh, actually, I can lean on this person for emotional support, but not solely. Like, they are not a mental health professional. I need to go and find that support somewhere else. And the same way that if you've got a slight niggle you've got a crick in your neck or something, you might get a neck rub from a partner. But actually, if it's a long-term thing, you'd go and get a massage. You'd go and get that sorted out by a professional because it's not your partner's responsibility. But for loads and loads of things, I haven't quite fully formed my ideas around what I want that episode to be, but you're totally right that actually if you're recognizing that, by all means talk to a partner about it, but then maybe explore talking to somebody else about it as well. I love it.
Absolutely.
Love it. Bradley.
So I think has been an amazing episode, Lee. I think the experiences that you've had, the work that you've done, everything that you've shared, it's just felt like the whole episode has just been absolutely awesome. And I think it will hit all sorts of listeners in all sorts of different ways. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do, because even if it's only one person that takes one bit of advice and says, actually, I'm going to do something that's going to help their mental health, then it's worth it. But my suspicion is it's going to be way more than one person. So on behalf of Nibbo and myself and everybody listening to this, just a massive thank you for coming on and just sharing your experiences with us. It's been amazing.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Bradley, what a good guest. I loved that episode. I know we thanked Lee at the end of the episode, but it'd be really nice to just thank him again, even though he's not here anymore. I really enjoyed recording that. How did you get on with it?
Yeah, I thought it was amazing. And I think, as well as thanking Lee, this episode going out, I mean, part 2 is the week after Remembrance Day, but it's just really worth recognising, isn't it? All those men and women that are in the services, whether they've been in and have left, or they're still serving in there. And I think it's really interesting, because the idea of having a veteran, you automatically think, an old person, don't you? But actually, here's Lee, who is a veteran, but is younger than us. So I think it's a great opportunity just to say thank you to everyone that is in the services for everything that they have done.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I want to reiterate, I don't know if people will have gone and seen it, but we will be there are links in the show notes to the Combat Stress Helpline for anybody who's experiencing any of the symptoms that Lee was talking about. But also I thought it was really interesting, and we went into it a little bit about how I think people, men, women in general, but specifically an ex-service person in this example, can often think when it comes to their mental health, I don't want to be a burden.
Yeah.
My situation isn't serious enough to warrant help. But if you think of any number of ailments, physical ailments are obviously the one that people tend to understand more clearly. They are better treated when they are earlier treated.
Yeah.
So if you feel like you've got developing symptoms of mental ill health, the people that are there to help you would rather you went to them earlier, because those symptoms are only going to get worse, and then that's more work for those people. You're actually helping those services by going earlier. And instead of saying, oh, yeah, well, I don't have full-blown PTSD, I haven't got the shakes, I can still just about function in my daily life, instead of waiting for that point, go early so that they can do some preventative work and some restorative work to get you back to where you need to be, instead of waiting to be at rock bottom before you go to that point.
Yeah, that's it. And I think, aside from the military aspect to this episode, I just think it's so important for those people who maybe, younger listeners who aren't sure where they're going and what they're going to do with their life, to hear that story, that actually here was Lee, somebody who considered, in his words, failed at school, and was capable but just lacked direction. And there's probably lots of people at all different ages kind of thinking those sorts of things, but to hear his journey and where he got to, I just think it was really interesting. I loved hearing from him, and the sort of experiences that he shared, and his proactive approach, I think, towards mental health is the thing that resonates most of all from the episode. And as you said, it's about acting early, like we would if we had some sort of physical ailment.
Let's just ask you, Bradley, for your opinions on Lee, because he spoke so openly and as if he'd done some thinking around his mental health, and he's obviously done some work on it. Presumably, then, as a man in society, we probably think of him as being weak and broken. Would you agree with that summary?
Well, absolutely not. I think that's what we're uncovering, isn't it? It's
Isn't
so
it
good
mad that people would think
so
that?
good. Yeah, to hear somebody come out and talk about it so positively, and to recognize just how level-headed they are and able to articulate the stuff they went through is because they've done that work. So
Yes.
it is crazy to bottle it up. And I know, actually, in kind of defense of lots of men as well, sometimes with the physical stuff, we're not great either. Lots of men are not great at going to the doctors when they recognize there is a physical thing. But it shouldn't be harder if it's a mental thing. We know we all need to be more proactive, and hopefully listening and hearing Lee's experiences, people will take that on board.
Such a key thing, isn't it? Like, if there are supposed to be more male mental health conversations, and if male mental health conversations are too difficult for some men, possibly service personnel in particular, then hearing a male mental health conversation is an incredibly good starting point. I would almost think about describing that as being like the thin end of a wedge, if you can.
A spicy wedge?
A spicy wedge, because mental health is a spicy subject, isn't it? People.
I hate that saying. Yeah,
it's such a good saying. Thin end of a spicy wedge.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was great. I think we need to say goodbye to the listeners and thanks for listening.
Well, if you tune in next week, you can hear from Mayners, who is a singer-songwriter. So very different background, but a wealth of knowledge and experience within mental health and his own journey. It's a really great episode. So yeah, tune in next week and hear from him.